Well, Allison, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself
Sure.
and take us
Yeah.
away?
I'm gonna share my screen. And can everybody see that okay? If you have questions, just interrupt me. Or if you type them in the chat, Lene will be monitoring that much better than I am. But so I am Allison Sandlin Liles. I am a priest who works 20 hours a week at a small church that used to be part of the Diocese of Fort Worth and is now part of the Diocese of Texas. And I work about 12 hours a week as the editor of growchristians.org, which has been a ministry of forward movement for the past 7 years and is a new ministry of Virginia Seminary, though that hasn't been publicized widely yet. And so at my church, I am the formation teacher. Well, not period, but I'm the primary formation teacher. And then because of my work with Grow Christians, I have a lot of resources and exposure to different ways of doing formation in smaller churches. So I think that's what qualifies me as a noted speaker. But what I thought would be helpful is just to talk through what we've done at St. Stephen's in the 5 years since I've been there. As leaders of small churches, you know that we are flexible. That is one of the best things about small churches. If you are at a big church, it's like steering a cruise ship, and it takes a lot longer to get the direction to change. But in small churches, we're like little canoes, and often all it takes is a paddle on the opposite side of the canoe, and then you've completely changed direction. So we have changed depending on the needs of our community over the past 5 years. We've changed a lot. So I just wanted to walk us through that and what's worked well for us, what has not worked well, and then share a couple other unique examples that I have picked up from friends in my small church work. So St. Stephen's suffered a split in 2008 when the Diocese of Fort Worth, the bishop, decided to leave the Episcopal Church. And so every church was asked to hold a vote, and whoever got the most votes to stay in the Episcopal Church or leave with the bishop got to keep the church building. And so I serve a church that lost that vote in 2008. And they were displaced. So the church where their families had been buried and married and baptized, they lost that space. They moved into a women's club basement, and then a wedding chapel, and then now our current location. And our current location is what you're looking at. It is a single room. So this is Easter this year when we were supposed to meet outside so that we could fit everybody. And then it rained, so we moved inside, and this is tight. So you'll see in the back corner by the banner, there are people standing there because that's where they had to stand. There's this under the cross here is our partitioned kitchen. There are people sitting in there. So this is all we have to work with. This is the formation room, the parish hall, the sanctuary, my office. This is it. We have 2 single bathrooms, and then a storage closet, and the partitioned kitchen, and then a sacristy / vesting room / flower ministry room. So when I started, 5 years ago, they had this kind of collection of children of all different ages. I don't think there were any 2 kids that were the same age. And they weren't really sure how to do formation because in their mind, Sunday school was an adult class and then a kid class. So they started to hold a children's class in the kitchen, sitting on the floor, which is gross. just in my opinion. So they were sitting on the floor having this class. You can see there's not a full ceiling, like the walls don't go up to the ceiling. So the choir was rehearsing at the same time. So you can't actually hear anything. And then after church, once or twice a month, they would do an adult forum, is what they called it. And so when I got there, they were really excited because they had talked. We're in a shopping center is where my church is. We're a storefront. They had talked to the Thai restaurant next door, whose workers showed up at 10 o'clock, but they didn't actually start serving customers until 11:30. So the Thai restaurant was happy to host our Sunday school. And I was like, I don't really think that that's the best idea. Like, I'm sure that those workers have not been trained in safe church policies. Also, there are a lot of knives and there's not a door on the kitchen. So I thank you. Like, they were really eager, but they could not, like, they couldn't get the segregated age model out of their head. So I decided to introduce intergenerational formation. The kids who were not coming every week. So my family, we're a clergy couple. So some weeks my two kids are with me. Some weeks they're with my husband at his church. And then we had a bunch of grandchildren who would come occasionally. And then some other kids in elementary school who were coming occasionally. And so you know how exhausting it is to plan a class for children and then no children show up. Like, it's discouraging, and it is not a good use of our time or our human resources. So I decided to do this intergenerational formation, and it would work if we had 8 kids show up or 0 kids. And the model was really, really simple. We had our worship service at 10 o'clock, followed by donuts and juice or coffee. And then I would try to get everybody who was eating those donuts and drinking the coffee, because it was all the adults, to quiet down, to come and sit down. And then not everybody did, but most of the people would stay for formation class. I would start with an opening prayer, and then I would read a picture book. So StoryPath is this first resource. They are not updating it anymore, but there are, I think they've gone through the Revised Common Lectionary 3 different cycles. And so they pair picture books with each, the Old Testament, the Epistle, and the Gospel for each week. And so, and they give you the age and then like sort of how it ties in to their reading. And at the time they were updating it, and they did it weeks in advance. So I live in a big city, so I was able to get the books from the library, the public library, put them on request, get them in. And a magic thing happens when an adult pulls out a picture book. Is children, no matter how old they are, they know to be quiet and they get focused. And so that was a great way for us to center. I would offer some I wonder statements after reading the book to help get kids to engage with it, and the adults too. And then would use lesson plans that work. So this is a free lectionary-based resource from the Episcopal Church. And they do it for young children, teenagers, and adults. And then they also have one that I used for intergenerational, which was kind of like all of them together. So I would offer some notes on the gospel. That's usually what picture book I had paired was with the gospel. And then they broke down the gospel into a play, essentially, with different parts. And all of our children at this point were 5 or older. They were all early readers. And so I would divide up, like, okay, who wants to be the narrator today? Or, Lene, will you be Jesus? And then, Scott, will you be Peter? And people would stand up. I would have the printouts available, and they would read the play. And there was something so beautiful about seeing a 5 or 6-year-old participating and putting on the gospel with an octogenarian. I realized there was magic when that was happening. And the thing that makes it work in small churches is that we all know each other. And so my daughter at that point was 6 years old, and her closest friend was an octogenarian who now is 89 years old. But this was 5 years ago. And because they know each other, the kids aren't intimidated to talk in front of the adults in the way they might be at a bigger church where they're not sure who all these grownups are. And because the adults know the children, they take them seriously. And so when we ask reflection questions after kind of reading through in this script format, the kids would answer and the adults would listen. And then they would hear these stories about something that happened during the week. And then the adults would check in on them the following week. And so this was incredible. So we did this up until the pandemic, really. Once a month, I tried to do an activity, something that was hands-on to get people like really engaged. So this is when it's important to know who's in your church. So this woman in the bottom corner in the zebra print is the most talented paper crafter. And so she makes all the cards that our church sends out to people on their birthday or their wedding anniversaries. So she brought in all of her card supplies, which is what we have in the left picture. And we went through our prayer list and sent cards to all of the people on our prayer list. The gospel that day had something to do about caring for those who were in prison and caring for the widows. And so it just made sense. And then on the right side, this is a free printout that I found online for Feast of the Holy Name. So we made Christmas ornaments to use on Feast of the Holy Name, which is in January. And so ideally it was in early January, people's Christmas trees were still up. And so they could go home and take them out. And so there was a teaching activity about all the different names of Jesus in the Bible and trying to figure out where they all came from. Our Candlemas activity was by far the biggest hit. We rolled wax candles and every person got into this. We had so many people stay, and it's super easy too. So things were going really well. And so that Candlemas was in February 2020. And then things changed next month. And we had to pivot and we kind of panicked. So our church had a book club that I did not run. But the book club came to me and said they really wanted to continue. But if you remember in the early days of the pandemic, you couldn't get anything ordered online. Like books from Amazon, for instance, were taking weeks and weeks to come in. And then I couldn't do formation. And I take formation really seriously because as a priest, that's part of our examination. When we take our vows, we're supposed to work as a priest, pastor, and teacher. And I don't consider myself a great teacher, but I feel like it's important to teach in this setting. So I was trying to figure out what to do. And a friend of mine, Becky Zartman, who's on staff at Christ Church Cathedral in Houston, posted in the Forma Facebook group, hey, my team has been working on Acts and Easter. This was, during Lent for the past few weeks. We're going to just make it public. So if anybody needs something to do during Easter, since it's clear we're not going back to church in person, here's everything you need. So people couldn't access books. We couldn't order books for a book study, but everybody had access to a Bible. So we launched a Zoom Bible study. And we started with Acts and Easter using Becky's curriculum. And then we just kept going. We kind of went backwards and did the gospel according to Luke. And then we did 1st and 2nd Corinthians, followed by Romans. And then my church had had enough of Paul. So then we went back to the very beginning and did Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. Leviticus nearly broke my church. As you know, Leviticus is where Bible studies go to die. But it was a very important Bible study because we are like the affirming church in our area. Like if you look up on gaychurch.org where you should go to church, it is St. Stephen's Episcopal Church in Hurst. And so it was really important for us to wrestle with some of those, what are known as the clobber verses, so that the members of our church had a response when people would say, well, the Bible says this, they could refute it. So Leviticus, we took a break. We did Samuel, Kings, we did the minor prophets. And what was happening while this was on Zoom is that people from other churches started joining us. So because of the unique situation for the Diocese of Fort Worth, most of us are small and under-resourced. And so we were getting people from other Episcopal churches, and there was no threat to the clergy about losing people or like you're cheating on your priest by going to someone else's class. We were all really supportive of this. And so our Bible study, I mean, our average Sunday attendance when I started at St. Stephen's was about 30 people, and we were getting over 20 people on these Bible studies. So people were really starved for it. My favorite one that we did was the Psalms. We did an Easter Bible study on the Psalms and studied them for 4 weeks. And then I taught people how to write a psalm using these prompts on the screen. And then our final class, we broke into small groups with about 3 people, and we read our psalms to one another. And one of the people who wrote a psalm was in the middle of cancer treatment. And so she wrote about receiving her chemo drip and what it's like laying on the table. And it wasn't a psalm of lament. This was a psalm of praise. And when she died later in the year, we read that as the psalm at her service. So all of these things I have notes for. If you see a Bible study that you would like, I am not proprietary over this. I've used so many sources. I'm happy to email you all these documents. So then we came back to worship, and we came back. We were in person again. Finally, our church space, as you saw, was really small, but because of that Bible study and a few other things, our church, when we came back, had grown tremendously, and we couldn't socially distance and be in that same little space. And so we had to figure out how to do formation when we had 2 services on Sunday morning, and the choir was practicing in our space between services. So Sunday morning was no longer an option for us. And this was really difficult. And most of our children had moved on. So my kids were still there, but again, they're not there every week. But all those grandchildren and then a couple other kids were no longer coming to church for a variety of reasons. And so we needed to figure out a different model. I asked so many people to figure out how to do Sunday morning formation, and was given so many suggestions, like, well, get rid of the choir rehearsal on Sunday. They're already practicing on Thursdays, or alternate with the choir, or do it after your second service, or maybe just do it once a month. And as a pastor at a small church, I feel like I know my congregation really, really well, and none of those options felt right. So something in me just kept saying that Zoom was working, and so why mess with this? The big problem was that we were doing all those Bible studies at 3:00 on a Wednesday, and that did not work for many people in our church. So I decided that we were going to start a Monday night formation class. It was going to be at 7 o'clock. So for me, selfishly, this is after I feed my kids. I live 35 minutes away from the church. So this allows me to do something at the, like for the church, but not at the church building. People who don't drive at night could still participate. And we have a lot of those people. And then everybody who has just come home from work can like fix dinner and then they sit and eat during formation. So this seemed to be really great. And we have done a lot of different series. And again, for these, I have slides for all these as well as what I taught, and I am more than happy to share it with you. So because we had grown so much during the pandemic, I offered a what we believe class. We used Callie Swanlin's How to Eucharist to learn about the Eucharist. We did a series on praying with icons and the Holy Spirit in Scripture, ways to pray, holy living and holy dying. This was the Lenten series we did this year to prepare for holy deaths. And that came about because we'd had so many funerals last year. And the two that were the most meaningful were the two members who had planned their entire service from start to finish. And the one that was the most painful was the one in which nothing had been prepared. No, like the powers of attorney and the preferences on where their remains would go, and certainly nothing with the service. And so we did this, and people joined from all over the country. It was like, well, my kids need to learn how to do this. And so I'm going to have them come, because every time I try to talk to my kids about what I want when I die, they get nervous and they think I'm jinxing it. And so like people's kids, adult children from across the country would join in. And we had a hospice chaplain. We had Knowing Your Congregation. Our musician, his husband owns a funeral home. So he talked to us about the cost of a funeral and how much it costs to embalm somebody or to cremate somebody, because there's so much mystery around that. And then
how many sessions are these usually?
They're usually 6.
Okay.
6 sessions. And that's been great, because if you're not interested in it, then don't come. Another one will come. And there's usually a couple weeks between each one where I do a lot of the kind of research. And we just finished this Desert Ancestor class on Monday. And then I'm doing a session on the mystics in November and December, because our church is moving and we're ready to change names, because the church that left the Episcopal Church is still called St. Stephen's in our town. And so we need a new name. And so this is a year that I'm teaching people about all these amazing saints that we commemorate in our lesser feast and fast, in hopes that we'll hear somebody that sounds like us. And so there's a book study that happens. They started over the summer when I wasn't teaching. And right now they're doing a book called The Old Testament, Strange and Sacred Scripture and Other Biblical Oddities, I think. And they are loving it. So they stopped it for my Desert Ancestors class, and then they'll pick it back up for 2 weeks until my mystics class starts. And so that is lay led. They do that one at the church at 5 o'clock, because nobody who works comes to that one. And that has worked really well for them, and I don't have to lead it. So it's great for them. So some of the things that we did keep from the Zoom, from pre-pandemic to post-pandemic, are Faith at Home bags. That was really great for us. So I love tangible things. And so I created all sorts of way for people to observe, in particular, Advent, Epiphany, and Lent and Easter at home. And
Allison?
yes.
Just a minute. So the book study and the other Zoom studies are all just for adults, correct?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
because you don't have any kids at this point.
We don't.
really.
We had my son, who is 14, participated in the What We Believe class because that functioned as our confirmation class.
Okay.
And he chose not to be confirmed, but he had to do that. So if we have a whole bunch of 2 and 3-year-olds right now, like 5 of them. And so we've set up space at our church for them. And I will put special bags together for these seasons for families to do at home. So most of them are adult bags, but then there will be separate ones for the little kids. And then in a couple years, my hope is that we'll go back to intergenerational formation, especially when we have the space for it. One of the things that has worked for a friend of mine's church, Rebecca Hatch, who's in Simsbury, Connecticut, is she had all these kids who were never there on the same time. And so they picked a Sunday of the month. I don't remember which one, like the first Sunday. If you're going to come to church at all this month, come the first Sunday. And they geared everything around kids for that service. So the hymns were picked with children in mind. There was a formation class with children in mind. There was the sermon that she preached had kids in mind. And so we've talked about doing that as well, but our kids are still young enough at our church that the parents can't commit to that yet because they don't ever know what their Sunday mornings are going to be like.
What's your average attendance?
So we're up to about 60 people. And we're all old. So I do want to say, I think it's important to say that we are a thriving, growing church, and we're still old. So you can be a thriving small church without a lot of children. It just looks different.
Do you have just your own child is the only teenager, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
And so we have had families with teenagers who have visited, and then I tell them that I'm so glad that they're there. I recognize we don't have other people their age. And then I give them the 2 Episcopal churches they're not even that close to us because of the split, like our diocese, it shrank so much, but who have youth ministers. And so we do a lot of collaborative work with them. Yeah. So the intergenerational thing, and that word I know is a little different because it's not young children, is creating opportunities outside of Sunday that are tactile. So with this member of the church on the left was a vacation Bible school volunteer when her college-age child was younger, and she really missed that. So she worked with our musician to plan an intergenerational Bible study morning. And so we did a salad bar for lunch. We sang a lot of songs that you have probably sung at vacation Bible schools. And then she had a craft for us. And my daughter, who's 12, came to that one. And then we do a Pasenki Ukrainian Easter egg workshop, usually this Saturday before Palm Sunday. And that is it for certain children. My daughter has enjoyed this, but it takes a long time. So you have to know your kids. But this came about because somebody in our church knew somebody who had all the materials and offered these workshops. So we did this, and this is another great evangelism tool. We always have people who come and bring granddaughters or like their moms will come. All right. Are there other questions? And then I have a couple other models, but yeah, I would love to hear.
Questions, thoughts. Where are you? Just speak up.
Pip said, yeah, gaychurch.org. We started having all of these LGBTQ young adults who kept finding us, and I could not figure it out. I mean, like, we are in a shopping center with terrible signage. There is literally another church with our exact same name 3 miles away. And so finally I just started asking, like, how did you find us? And then I learned we're listed on a website called gaychurch.org as an affirming church. Mm-hmm.
I hear your models for your church in general and getting kids involved. Do you have anything that for building a teens ministry?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. So this is one of those like chicken or the egg situations. Like, we don't have any teenagers, so we haven't created a teenager ministry. But then, like, perhaps we should create a teenage ministry without teens in hopes that that will help attract them. So that it's really difficult. And so I don't live close to the church. So my kids go to a different Episcopal churches that's only 2.5 miles away. They go to their youth group. My son's godfather's the rector there. And so that I would invite, the Bible studies are certainly, or not Bible studies, the Zoom formations would definitely be appropriate for kids. For, I would say, like 7th grade and up. It's just the last thing that my kids want to do after they've been at school all day is then get onto Zoom and do another formation class.
One of the things I've done in the past in those situations is I've turned the acolytes into a semi-youth group. Mm. So the last time I did it, I think we had 6 acolytes, something like that. And what I did is we met quarterly, I think. And I turned part of that meeting, besides practicing what they needed to do, I turned it into fun formation kinds of things, scavenger hunts around the church for different things, for different names, for, you can do a lot of liturgy formation that way. Mm-hmm. And some other things like that. So I wouldn't try to do something all the time, but if you can build it up from a small group like that, that's worked in the past. I think it's May, we've got a gal who created what she calls the Secret Society of Acolytes, and has done just that. She's gamified her acolytes and turned it into a formation tool. So I think that would be a real option if you don't have very many, especially if you have some adult acolytes who are willing to have some fun and be a little crazy.
That's great. That's great. We lost our acolytes, or my daughter has kind of like aged out of wanting to do it. But we don't have space for them to sit anywhere, like a separate apart space. So we have like a volunteer crucifer every week. Someone just does it in the congregation. And so because of that, we've integrated the kids that we do have into the rest of the church, like to serve as a greeter, to serve as a lector, as a limb, and then coffee hour as well.
Stephen, did you have a question?
I do. Thank you so much, Allison. I find this to be very interesting, and I snap pictures of a couple of slides.
Okay.
Um, the the reason why I asked the question about the size of the congregation, and thank you for that answer, is that in my case, my church is maybe 20 to 30 active people. I'd like to say they're all older, but in fact, the most active congregants are over 80. And there's a number of other folks who are nowhere near that age who choose to not be active. So I'm finding we've gotten some good traction around a periodic kind of Bible study program, and they won't do things during the week, so we do it on Sundays after coffee hour, and we'll get 5 or 6 people and some beautiful witnesses and sharing of life stories and tons of questions. It really is awesome. I don't do a heavily structured thing, and but beyond that, I'm finding that in this particular culture, they don't do things and they don't want to do things. And so a lot of these things like crafts and social events around food, I'm struggling with how to find some kind of medium that they would find enticing, so that would also have as kind of a side effect some sense of formation beyond kind of sitting around a table and talking about scripture, which I think is absolutely core. And so I'm not saying that's not a good thing.
Oh, right. Yeah.
They're good with worship. I mean, they're good with worship ministries. But there's I've not been there long. I've been there about a year and a half, but and they've got a history of being kind of a low commitment church, but they're also a grieving church, like a lot of older congregations. A lot of their members have died in the last 5 or 6 years, and then they've been through COVID, as we all have. So I don't know if folks have ideas. I'm not trying to whine so much as trying to catalyze how I or others in this situation might translate some of these notions of formation, which are very creative and very lovely, to a congregation that may be smaller and less energized to engage in some of the stuff around these things. Does the question make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
I'd love to share about this church. Trinity Episcopal Church in Torrington is doing something that might work for your congregation, Stephen.
Well, I actually know the rector really well, so
Carrie?
I don't think she's mentioned this one. So tell me
good.
more.
So we were talking, Carrie and I are in a something called Small Church Chats, which I invite any of you to join. I'll say more about that in a little bit. And we were talking about formation, and she does not work full time and did not have the hours to create a sermon every week and also a formation class every week. And so she found people who were willing to commit one Sunday a month. So they have this rotation model where, like, the first Sunday of every month is going to be a lectionary Bible study. The second Sunday of the month, there's this whole group of people who've been watching the television show The Chosen. And so they have an episode they're supposed to watch at home, and then they have a discussion group about it. There's someone who is trained in godly play. So they do a godly play for all ages, which is a big draw for children. And then also, then Carrie does just kind of an assortment of topics, like whatever she feels like needs to be taught. And then somebody has some sort of a theological training in the church. And whenever there's a fifth Sunday, we'll often do like church history or some other kind of a theology course that has a set curriculum. So she's doing that.
That's
So I'll reach out to Carrie. Yeah, she's
Okay.
actually she's like down the road.
Oh, perfect.
And we're in a cohort together, but this has not been something that's come up in those cohort discussions yet. So this is cool. Thank you.
Oh, good.
The other thing, I've done a couple of things in a similar situation. I've done a whole series on the liturgy, just about a paragraph on different parts of the liturgy, and stuck it in the bulletin. So it's just there, and most people will read a paragraph in the bulletin, I've done a what's your question, and have a question box for like a month, and then during announcements you pull a question out and give a short answer to it, or say we're going to do something on, if you've got a topic that is coalescing from those, you do some, a lot of people seem to have questions about X, so we're going to do this, and that way the information, the questions are coming from them. So the commitment's more likely to come from them. There was a third thing, and now I can't remember it.
Alexia has their hand up. I don't.
Yeah,
I love that last idea. We tried a stump the priest thing at coffee hour, and it was a dud. It's good. You try stuff on, but a question
My favorite
box.
Connecticut phrase. Yep.
yeah, give them.
Try
Yes.
stuff on.
Oh, Allison. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, if Rebecca and
Yeah.
and Carrie. So, but anyway, but the notion of a kind of a question box.
Yeah, it gives
That way
people
they're not put
a
on the
chance
spot. They don't have to say something out loud. They can just put a question in there.
We
Yeah.
have a little church bank that I keep on my counter at my church. And because at churches, when they think about like, God, why are people crossing themselves? Like, I've always wondered this, and they can like write it on the bulletin, rip it off, stick it in the little church bank.
Alexia, you've got a question?
I do, actually. So as you can see, we have a couple of representatives from St. Michael's here.
Yeah.
We have a bit of an interesting situation. Just like you were talking about, Stephen, we have a much older population at St. Michael's, and we're about 30 to 40 members on average. Interestingly, they're all very active. Almost all of them, if we have an event or something, we ask for volunteers, they'll jump to it. It's great. But other than my spouse, Pip, and myself, the average age is like between 60 and 90. And so my daughter is 2.5. We have 2 other children who kind of come sporadically. We're trying to do something to actually encourage more children to be coming, and to give them something to do during service and some other events as well. But no one in the church really has a lot of experience in terms of that. We, the young people, have essentially decided to start running these things with no experience or preparation. So question, you mentioned a lot of different resources that you have here. Do you have like a Google Drive form or a resource collection?
But I'll share the slides, and because I have like 2 more slides of just resources as well, that I think would work for intergenerational ministries.
This is always also being recorded. It'll be up on YouTube. Perfect. So if you need to go back and look, you can look. If I'll put my email in there, and if you want to email me, also you can send me this stuff. I can send it on to you.
Yeah, I think getting the links would be good. I think the video, let us link, unless you put it in the show notes, which you could do.
Okay, perfect.
Well, oh, sorry, Scott, did you have something else you were going to say?
Yeah, just to sidelight, we're at the same size as all of us. Obviously, we self-selected to to this forum. We have about 25 to 30 regular attendees. One thing we started a year ago, which is working pretty well, is a dinner church one Sunday a month, and it has more of a formation element to it because it's not a full-blown, service, and it's around a meal. So that's actually gotten good traction. People, seem to be up for the more of the social aspect of celebrating around a meal. So just a thought.
Great.
St. Lydia's in New York also does waffle church in the morning.
Yep.
For if your church is more into breakfast than coming out at night.
Oh, that's great. Bishop Aaron's in the Episcopal Church in Connecticut was telling me about a pizza church in ECCT that has become wildly popular. I think they're on a Saturday night because that's when they could get a supply priest because they were all booked on Sunday morning. So they just moved church to Saturday night, which was brilliant. I mean, just talk about small church creativity.
Yeah, we're actually getting interesting, like younger families that might not be able to do Sunday morning for whatever reason, will come to much more casual dinner church thing. So
what day of the week is your dinner church and how often?
Once a month on Sunday night, 5 o'clock.
You're not competing with sports, I imagine.
Yeah, it's after sports. It's early enough so kids aren't, they can be done. We're done by 6:30, so they can go home and do homework or go to bed. Yeah. Oh,
that's great. So the other thing, this is a church in the Diocese of Virginia. Stacy Williams Duncan is the vicar there, and she incorporates a picture book into their Advent services, which I thought was really smart. She picks a picture book that's related somehow to the season, and it's read in the place of the second lesson. And she scans every page so that it can be shown for their live stream. And then also, if you can't see it in the church, I think kids come up forward for it. Then they do the sequence hymn, the gospel, and then she preaches. And the sermon is brought in, like this book makes its way into the sermon. So it feels more kid friendly. She said that she started it initially because Stacy's been a priest long enough that she just could not think of anything else to say about Advent that her church had not heard already. And so this became a way to have something that was a little newer and fresher. And then her church loved it. And so she does it every year now. She publishes the books in advance, or the name of the book that she's going to be reading in advance in case people want to find it at a library or order it. And then just some resources for intergenerational and small church in particular. Gen On Ministries is really one of the go-to ecumenical organizations. And on the slides, which I think we'll get to y'all somehow, that here is a hyperlink. You can register for a free workshop on why intergenerational ministry is so important and how to get it to happen. And then they have a lot of paid workshops and cohorts as well. And it's small church affordable, like $35 to join a cohort. And they have just loads of new blog posts, resources, all sorts of things. And that's genonministries.org. PRC, Practical Resources for Churches, and in particular, Karen Ware Jackson's materials there just today, I got an email from them called One More Page, and it was a list of picture books that I had to work really hard not to order all of them for all of my godchildren, niece and nephew, like for my church. St. Nicholas Day. There was one for Advent, like for you read a different page every day during Advent. They also do webinars, workshops, lots of resources. And then just for small church ministry in general, I have to plug my own group, Small Churches Big Impact Collective. So we've just finished recording our 3rd season of our podcast, which comes out in Advent. We also have a Facebook page and a group. And then also we host small church chats 4 times a month. So you can join in with church leaders. They're mostly ordained, mostly Episcopal, but not exclusively. And we sort of function as each other's staff. So if you've got a problem and you don't have a staff to troubleshoot with you, you can bring it. Like, guys, I don't know what to do about stewardship this year. My church is tired of everything that we've done. What are y'all doing? And no one is really proprietary over their stuff. So this has been a great resource. And then just these are books that I use regularly. And all of these are would work very well for intergenerational formation at your church. So they are all made to do things at home, but they could very easily translate to church. Faithful Celebrations is a series that goes everything from Thanksgiving and Labor Day and St. Francis feast day to Super Bowl Sunday and Cinco de Mayo. So our family hosted a Cinco de Mayo party before the pandemic for the whole neighborhood, and it had prayers and activities and a little bit of history about what the holiday is. Faithful Families has a whole bunch of series as well. Tracy Smith is an expert in this. And I think that's it. And this is my email address if you guys have any other questions. Please let me know.
A couple other things I thought of. To Dance with God by Gertrude Mueller Nelson, which is an older book, but it's a classic and it has wonderful, wonderful ideas that can help you spring off things. If you haven't heard of a story walk, story walks are you take a book, you blow it up big, each page, and you put it out in front of your church so people can walk and read, and you can have activities below it. It also acts as a forward-facing way of getting people in your community to know you're there if you have the space. It's a great fun thing, and there is a recording of Glennis Nellis talking about story walks from last year. The other thing, you're talking about having small children in worship in an older congregation. One thing I've done in the past is to have the occasional Sunday with something that everybody does. Like if it's an Eastertide, every time there's an Alleluia, you have something for everybody to wave, like streamers, and you give it to the kids and the elders, and you do a little prep beforehand and say, this is what we're going to do this Sunday. Or you could do it for Pentecost, something like that. You could have kids listen for Amen. You can, and have everybody put their hands up when there's an Amen. Anything like that, where you can encourage people to be that much more participatory in a way that kids can too.
I think that's so great. And what that's doing is teaching the kids to sit through church and to engage with it, which is
to
really,
listen.
yeah. We have, I am not a priest who keeps herself up on a pedestal. Like I'm like, and I think part of it is that I've had little kids. I've had the child who's playing peekaboo under the altar frontal when mom is celebrating the Eucharist. But like I often have these little 2 and 3 year olds wander up to behind the altar, and then we'll sit there while I'm celebrating, or like pull a chair up and stand there with me. Like we want them to feel like it's their church as much as it is the 86-year-old.
Your goal with kids is that when they get to teenagers, they don't say it's my parents' church, they say it's my church.
Yeah,
However
I think
much or little that they participate, you want them to say it's my church.
I think that's so important. And I've heard Wendy Claire Berry talk a lot about like this research that she has seen that says that what indicates like kids growing into an adult faith is not participation in like a Sunday school or a youth group, but it's having like connection to the worship experience themselves, like a connection to the other adults. Like where else are the kids engaging with people with so many other generations apart from them? So just being able to keep that communication open at home, giving parents tools to keep talking about it at home, and then helping kids feel comfortable at church. So it's their church, right? Yeah.
Other questions? Thoughts? Ponderings?
I have one actually. Allison, you mentioned something about that website. What was it called, darling? Gaychurch.org. Gaychurch.org. Do you have any idea how your church got listed there?
No clue. I think that people, my guess is that we have a trans support group that meets once a month.
Okay.
And I think that like that got it there.
I just went on there and it looks like it's pretty easy for somebody to recommend it. Just like you would in Wikipedia where you submit an edit basically.
And then I think that there's someone who like on the back end who's vetting churches to make sure that it's not like a trap.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Personally, that makes me feel better that, you know, people aren't using this website for evil.
Right. Right. That would not be great.
No, they're pretty careful about vetting the churches that wind up on it. I know. So, because that could be bad.
I think so. I know that
we've got time.
I want to make sure that you, like, if we don't hear anything else tonight, it's that formation doesn't have to look a certain way. And small church formation is an entirely different thing than bigger church formation. So just because it's not what other churches are doing doesn't mean that it's wrong. And I think that that is really important. And I still have to keep reminding my church that 5 years into doing formation in kind of weird, unique ways that are appropriate for our context, that we're just not like, I'm not going to have a children's sermon every week. Like that's just not what our church needs right now. We're going to get a bigger space and we don't need to have 3 or 4 classrooms for all the different age groups like that. That's not what's going to happen. So there's so many good free resources out there, particularly books that come with study guides. Stephen, that might be another option for your church, or things that come with videos. The Episcopal Church is putting out a ton of things right now as well.
Yeah.
Like about baptism in particular.
My favorite book on youth ministry is Mark DeVry's Sustainable Youth Ministry. And the basis of that book is that youth ministry is all about making connections between youth and adults. And however you're going to do that, that's what's important. And I've seen youth group after youth group after youth group fail because they're insular. They're assuming one kind of kid. I mean, you know, you're going to have sporty kids, you're going to have theater kids, you're going to have reader kids, you're going to have math kids, you're going to have, you know, and to give them an image of faith that's one way is a guarantee to fail.
I can't help but wholeheartedly agree. What was the author of that book? Sustainable
His
Youth
name
Ministry?
is Mark DeVries, DeVies, I think. It's called Sustainable Youth Ministry.
Is that V's or Vries?
Vries with a V.
Right. DeVries, is there an R in there? I'll find it.
Well, I think so. I'm terrible at remembering how to spell names, so.
Okay, I'll find it.
But he's also written one on sustainable children's ministry, but it's just a lot of the stuff he talks about is for slightly bigger churches, but his core ideas are really, really helpful.
And I bet you could partner with other churches, even if, like, for me, there's not another Episcopal church within like a 20-minute drive of me. But there is a Disciples of Christ and a UCC church that I would feel safe having youth at my church go to. Like, it would, like, we have theologically, we're kind of in the same boat. And so that is who I would look to if we did have teenagers that were more than my one child, to partner with, and maybe not weekly, but have something monthly, where you can get together, and then that would be more sustainable, I think, and rotate between churches too.
Yeah, I've got ideas.
Good.
That's where you start. And the thing about ideas is you throw something against the wall and you see what sticks. Not everything will work.
Stephen was saying that ECCT, the Episcopal Church in Connecticut, does their mantra is try things on. And my church, we are fully invested in that. We take things off the rack, try them on all the time. And if they don't fit, it's fine. Like, we just put it back and we try something else.
It's for somebody else, and
yes,
that's okay.
And it's really important to let people know it's okay.
Yeah.
And it's so much easier to do that in smaller churches. You know, we don't have to work with, like, we're not doing quarterly planning in my church where I have to think about something 6 months, 4 months away. We just kind of make it happen. And if it doesn't work, it's fine. And we've done that with music and with liturgy. We've done it with classes.
Put on my teacher hat. There's 4 levels that you can look at things. Okay, you try something and it's an absolute disaster and you will never touch it again. The next level up is, it sort of might have worked, this piece of it, and you pick up that piece and you're going to put that into somebody else. The next one is, it mostly worked, but we're going to tweak it here and there and the other way. And the other one is, it's an unmitigated success, and we're going to do exactly the same thing. The first and the last almost never happen. You're stuck in the middle 9 times out of 10. So you just try it. If it's a disaster, you say,
at least we know
that one doesn't work. Check that off the list. by the way, for all you guys, I do all kinds of consulting for free, and I've been doing small churches my entire ministry. So if you ever want to get a hold of me, feel free. So
I would take her up on that.
I need to drop off. It was a great session, and look forward to seeing the resources.
Great.
Thank you
Scott.
guys so very much. It was really helpful. Blessings.
Good. Bye.
I'm glad you were all here.
Yeah.
Paula, was that helpful for you guys? You got a whole
Absolutely. I've got brand new ideas that I'm ready to implement.
As do I, my dear.
Fun because these guys, I've been around the block, so this is just what we needed, the energy, and yeah.
Well,
I
that's
just think
great.
one of the things that we talk about in small churches, big impact, is like not using numbers, but using percentages. And so if we're looking at St. Michael and All Angels, like with a small average Sunday attendance, like you guys had like a tremendous percentage of your Sunday attendance was present on this call tonight. Like this is
Yes,
amazing. Like it just shows your commitment to
yes.
this. Mhm.
And our whole church is like that. We don't have a lot of people, but if we say, you know, we're doing this event, who can help us? I'll have 10 people signing up by the time we leave the room.
Wow.
Yeah, so
That's
I look forward to
amazing.
good stuff.
Oh, one
And
of the things that we're doing at our church that has been really successful, we haven't really tied it to formation yet. It's more of a fellowship thing, is Dungeons and Dragons,
Mhm.
which we have all these people who are like older Gen X that grew up playing it in the 80s, and then all these like
Yes.
younger teenagers who learned about it through Stranger Things, and so now they're into it. And so we had over 20 people at our last campaign and had to like break up, and people bring their friends too. And it's just wild to me because it's like a 5-hour commitment on a Saturday. So my kids can't go to the next one, and they're really upset that they can't go to church. It's on a Saturday. But that's been something. There are Grow Christians posts about Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop role player games, and like how to tie them into the gospel, but we haven't made that connection yet.
We got
We actually-
Kennedy's Disciples and Dragons. Do you know?
No.
Yeah, so it's based on the Dungeons and Dragons, but it's got it's got input on like Adventures of Paul and things, and so
Oh my gosh.
Did Roger Spear do that?
Reverend Joe Kennedy.
Okay.
I can send you that. I'll send that to
We
you.
we
And,
took-
pardon me.
We took a look at it, and you know, my spouse and I are both like veteran dungeon masters and have done this for decades.
it
And
did.
we have some tweaks, but I think it's going to be a good thing.
That sounds really cool.
That's why
One
I
of
got
the things,
these guys, because I knew that it had potential. So yes, I'll pass that on to you for
Thank you.
sure.
It did look to be mostly one shots, but we're working on an actual like full campaign. That was the tweaks that we're making.
I say tweaks sometimes a little loosely.
I know. This could be a lot of fun.
one of the things my parish started doing during COVID is we bought a little portable bonfire thing, and everybody loved it. So All Souls were having s'mores and soup outside in the cold in New England. And everybody's so excited. The kids run around, they roast marshmallows, the adults get to stand around and talk. And it's there's been some strain in the town with some political stuff around LGBTQ, so we invited the local LGBTQ IA plus group to come and just hang out. as a safe space to have some chocolate.
And that's one of those things that we're talking about, using your strengths. Like, you have space. Like,
Yeah.
that's a strength. Like, use what you have.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's our parking lot, but which isn't all that big, but hey, we did it. And it
Let's see if mom can find a fire pit. That's what I'm hearing.
They're not that expensive.
No.
And they're only about,
You don't understand her
My mother
mom.
can do anything. You have no idea.
Oh, my dear, the first church I worked at, the sherry budget for coffee hour was bigger than the Christian ed budget.
Oh, that's awesome.
Okay.
You have an idea then.
I'm already thinking of your like the burning of the palms liturgy that you can do with your new fire pit.
Yes, exactly. That, you can do all kinds of things.
I'm putting this
Pip's
slide.
brain is going like this.
Pip's brain often goes like that. He loves him so much.
So does mine. So
I'm going to sign off and say goodnight, but thank you so much, and I will be in touch.
See you, Paula.
Thank you both so much.
I hope that all
Alrighty.
went well. I hope things go well with you.
I'm going to log off too, but it was so nice meeting you all. Thank you so much.
Thank
Nice to meet
you.
you all.
Oh,
Bye.
wait, where can I find this? You mentioned it was on YouTube.
It
Where about
will be next week sometime.
Next week,
We
but
get a
where
chance to
about? What channel?
upload it. It's on the Province One YouTube channel.
Okay, we can find
And
it.
Lene, will you have everybody's email address who registered?
I can look.
Well, I can drop the files in for the people who are still on the call if
Okay.
y'all want it.
Sounds great.
And then just don't leave just yet. Let me put this in there.
Sure.
I just compressed it, so hopefully it will. All right.
Okay, that way you can email me.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not in my
So,
email, sometimes it doesn't exist.
all right. So there it is. If you can download it from the chat
Perfect.
if you want.
Yes, I'm old enough that I did D&D in college and I graduated in 1980.
I love it. It's amazing. I have evidently the DM at our church is phenomenal and like leads things at the local Comic-Con, and
My
yeah.
daughter writes for video games and she also leads a D&D group once a week, an international one, which is really wild.
Yeah, it's international as well. All right. Well, thank you both.
Yes.
Bye.
I have a child to go and re-napify.
Yes. Nice to meet you all.
Nice meeting you.
Thanks, Lene.
Yeah, that went well.
Yeah. I know after the pandemic, like we've doubled in size, but don't have kids. I mean, really, no little kids. They all moved, or one of them, who's my daughter's age, just stopped coming. So
yeah, it's interesting. Next month, we're talking about building adult community online on Zoom around Bible studies. So
well, I'm happy to share all my stuff. I've got all these slides, and I mean the Bible studies it was mostly just, those are just my notes, but it's been great because I can do Zoom and then like minimize my screen. And so I have my Word document pulled up so that I don't have to like feel like I've memorized or become an expert in Romans. And It's worked well. And the best thing about our Bible study, which I didn't mention, and we haven't continued it with our formation class because of time, is we would spend the first probably 20 minutes checking in and praying for one another. And the
Yeah.
amount of growth that came from that was just incredible.
In terms of community,
Mhm.
it was, yeah, St. Matt's jumped onto Zoom because it was Lent.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of it, they said, can we keep going? And we've pretty well kept going almost the whole time since then. One thing or another, different topics. We've had new people leading that have never led before. People who participated, like you said, people who can't drive at night, people who are coming straight from work, people who have little kids at home, they don't have to get a sitter. So we're not doing it consistently, but we're still doing Zoom on a semi-regular basis. Not always lectionary based, different topics. And
I really do think, I mean, we have a few people who are not great with technology. And so during the pandemic, we just masked up and I went to their house and showed them how to log on to Zoom. And I mean, some of them like took out a notepad and wrote down step by step, and I showed them how to bookmark their browsers. I'm like, God, if these, 88-year-olds can figure it out, I know that.
Yeah, we've got an 86-year-old. We've got a 94-year-old who does church on Zoom.
It's amazing.
Yes, somebody came and held her hand and walked her through it the first couple of times, and they fumble from time to time, and so don't we all.
Absolutely. Like, we just know, like, they're not going to mute themselves. So like if their dog starts barking, like we're just going to listen to the dog bark. Because if I mute her, it's never getting unmuted again. So like there are different things. And we have one woman who calls in and does it through her phone because she doesn't see well enough to figure it out. It's just, yeah, people are
It
really
is
incredible.
A phenomenal tool that allows us to do things like this. And we cannot not use it.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you so much for doing this.
You are welcome. Thanks for asking me. It was fun.
Great.
Good. Have a great night.
Good evening. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.